Our sponsor today is GLSA. For those non-members who may be dropping in on the call today, GLSA, or Group Legal Services Association, is an affiliate of the American Bar Association, is a professional membership organization representing the legal services plan industry and provider attorneys. And joining GLSA is just a good way for solos and small firms to increase their business. So check it out at glsaonline.org. Okay, my name is Tom Martin, and I'll be your host today. Our teleconference is about the origin story of Codex Stanford and the future of the practice of law. I'm very excited to introduce you today to our guest, who I had the pleasure of meeting when I flew down to visit Codex on the sprawling Stanford campus with its rolling green hills and breezy sunshine in Palo Alto. Beautiful place. And he is a true legal luminary. Dr. Roland Vogl is a lawyer, scholar, and media entrepreneur who, after nearly 15 years of professional and academic experience, has developed a strong expertise in intellectual property and media law, innovation, and legal informatics. Currently, he's executive director of the Stanford Program in Law, Science, and Technology, and a lecturer in law at Stanford Law School. He focuses his efforts on legal informatics, which is carried out at the Center for Legal Informatics, also known as CodeX, which he co-founded and leads as executive director. Roland, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. And how's the weather out in Palo Alto? Is it still as beautiful as it was?
It's breezy. It's kind of cold today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the campus at Stanford is just it's just gorgeous, and it seems kind of out of a movie. It's just a very beautiful place to work.
It is a beautiful place.
Well, again, I want to thank you for making time for us this morning. I think you have one of the coolest jobs around, and before we get into the Codex origin story, though, I'd love to learn more about you. If you could tell us a little bit about where did you grow up?
So I was born and raised in a small town in Austria in the mountains called Innsbruck, and it's mostly known for having had the Winter Olympic Games there twice. And yeah, it's a beautiful place. But as soon as I finished my first law degree, I tried to get away from there, and I went to Brussels for a little bit less than 2 years, and then went to the US, and that was about 18 years ago at this point.
Wow, I actually had the pleasure of visiting Innsbruck with my dad in the 80s, and it's a beautiful place. But growing up there, is it kind of a small town in the feeling, and that's why you wanted to move to Brussels, or?
No, it was. Let me see. It's kind of a tourist destination. It's not too. It's 150,000 people.
Yeah.
And there's some industry there. It's a beautiful area. You can go skiing in the winter, mountain biking in the summer. There's a lot of things to do. For me, it was more during my study. I always saw myself as a sort of a lawyer in Innsbruck and a general practitioner, and I thought that's what I wanted to do in my life. But then I was somebody's texting, when will it start? So I guess people think that we're still chit-chatting. But so I did an exchange year in the UK at the University of Cardiff, and there was a 1-year exchange on what's called the Erasmus program. And that's really the first time when I lived in an international environment. There were people from all over the world, and that sort of started the desire in me to live in an international environment. And so Innsbruck is not really the place for that. And so that's
Okay.
why I was looking for opportunities in Brussels at the European institutions, first thing out of law school. And then I wanted to study at an internet, at the British or US law school to get my advanced degree in law. And I found this place at Stanford where we have the Stanford Program in International Legal Studies, which is a JSM program. And I came in 1999 to get my master's here. And then, I thought I would do that for a year, but really kind of fell in love with California and sort of the energy of Silicon Valley, and was looking for opportunities to stay here. And then was very fortunate to find a job at a local law firm, Fenwick and West, where I practiced copyright law and trademark law for a little while. And then there was an opportunity to come back to Stanford as the first teaching fellow of the LLM program in law science and technology, because we started that I think in 2002, and so I was hired as a teaching fellow for that program, and then just stayed at Stanford, and we started to get more responsibilities as executive director of the program in law science and technology, which is sort of an overarching program that houses different centers that all focus on different aspects of law and technology. And about 10 years ago, we started CodeX as a joint center between the law school and the computer science department.
And we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. I definitely want to go into that in depth. But I'm struck by one of the things that you said earlier. You said that you, I mean, even as a kid, you saw yourself as going into the law, like you
yeah, I
you
think
wanted.
I guess how if I thought I like many kids want to be policemen originally, and then I thought that at about 10 I sort of maybe influenced by television shows about lawyers. I thought, wow, that's kind of a cool job, and you can sort of stand up
Wow,
for people in court, and so from then on I thought that's a cool job. I want to be a lawyer. And
so from the age of 10,
yeah,
that's what you knew you wanted to be.
yeah.
Cool. What do you remember, like one of the TV shows that you watched that influenced you?
What was it called? Perry Mason, or
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But I must say, I mean, quite frankly, I mean, I found the studies in law studies in Austria quite tedious and and very doctrinal, and didn't really enjoy it, and really enjoyed studying law when I came to the US. The program I was studying in was started by one of the founders really of the Law and Society movement, Lawrence Friedman, and it was very much looking at law as not as its own kind of science, but rather as a field that is influenced by by economics and as sociology, and it just took a much more holistic view on sort of legal problems. Also a comparative view, and that's really when I started, seeing this as something interesting.
So I understand how you got interested in law, but what drew you to the technology generally? Like,
That's a
how
great
did that aspect come into it?
That's a great question. So initially, I was quite intrigued by the media, and I thought, why not start, for my research papers and for my master's thesis and what have you, why not start looking into legal aspects around media? And so, I was looking initially into defamation law, privacy law, and that ultimately also got me interested in internet and legal issues surrounding the internet. From at the time, trademark issues around domain name protection to copyright issues, copyright piracy issues. So I really started focusing on those issues. In fact, when I came here, my research at Stanford was comparative research on the differences between the the European tradition and legal culture on privacy protection and comparing that with the US approach to privacy protection. And that was in 99 2000, just when that first safe harbor agreement was negotiated between the EU and the US. And so I had a strong interest in the legal issues surrounding the internet and media, and then kind of what drew me to sort of the side of like, you know, technology for the legal system was really that that connection we built with the computer science department. Professor Geneseret, he's the research director of CodeX. He's an AI scholar, and he's been sort of dabbling in, you know, the AI and law world already in the 90s. And you know, that community has been around since, I mean, AI and law scholarly community has been around since sort of I guess since the 50s, but you know, they started organizing in the 80s. And he did he sort of made me realize that there's new opportunities for bringing bringing AI and technology to the legal system, just because of the internet, the availability of data, of legally relevant data, and sort of new techniques in modeling legal arguments and legal processes, that he thought there's new opportunity there. And what got me excited about it is really sort of this approach of like, you know, we do research, but not only for the sake of research, not only for, you know, writing papers, but we want to, you know, solve very specific problems. And, you know, and sometimes our solutions, you know, take form in a prototype or in a real deployable technology. And so I very much enjoyed that kind of applied approach that, you know, the computer science folks here are taking. And that for me, that's quite compelling. I love building stuff and, you know, putting together, you know, the ingredients to build real solutions. And that's really what's been got me so excited about this legal technology and legal informatics field.
Well, that's really interesting. I understand, you know, that being in an academic position, that it might pull you towards theory. You know, that it might be more about articles and publishing in terms of the theory of intellectual property or you know, different issues that come up with respect to media. But the pool that you got that caught you was more in the direction of application and actually working on something concrete. I'm curious that even in doing the work that you do with CodeX, you still continue to work as a professor, right? You still lecture?
I'm still teaching legal informatics. Today actually is my last class this quarter. And so I teach, I do research, try to publish, and but also, you know, work on quite specific projects that you know, try to, you know, kind of solve specific legal information problems.
And for those who might not be familiar with that phrase, do you mind defining it? Legal informatics. What does that mean?
Well, legal informatics is basically, well, that's a good question. Is sort of looking, basically all of the law is information. It's information that's encapsulated in the laws that we create as humans, or information in the world. You know, certain facts. You know, something occurred, or, you know, somebody got hit by a bus. Those kinds of things. And legal informatics is sort of taking an information scientist's view of those problems and then leveraging, you know, technology and information technology to you know, solve, you know, or automate or mechanize certain aspects of that information problem. Now that sounds very abstract. Legal informatics is a broad term. We generally kind of see projects in, I would say, three different buckets. So one is
Hmm.
legal document management. Here we use computers to help us organize or get to legal information more efficiently. The other one's legal infrastructure. By that we mean the systems we create to connect the stakeholders in the legal system. So think of like all these platforms or marketplaces for lawyers as an example. Last one is what we call computational law. And computational law is basically the automation and mechanization of legal analysis. So there are two um, subgroups of computational law. So one is the rule-based approach to solving legal information problems. So think of TurboTax as the classic system. It's a system that understands the tax code and understands facts about your life and
Right.
can apply that tax code to your specific situation, and then spits out a legal decision, which is like, how much you have to pay the government in taxes. And the other aspect is the whole area of predictive analytics in the law, using statistical AI and machine learning to go through big amounts of data, if you have the data, which is always a challenge in certain legal areas. But to go through big amounts of data, identify patterns, and then maybe even make certain forecasts about potential legal case outcomes. There's many different areas of predictive analytics in the law, but it's those two, the rule-based approaches and the statistical approaches to automating legal analysis, that make up computational law, which again is one of the sub areas in legal informatics.
Interesting. It is in a way what you were talking about before about being able to work in concrete areas where you can apply the law to a specific situation using, um, using a computer code of some kind, or um, yeah, analyzing the data. So it sounds to me like it's the application of law to the facts using data and technology. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
concrete way of applying the law in a specific situation, and
Mm-hmm.
it's great because it's kind of like the difference between having science for science's sake in theory and actually going out and doing experiments and figuring out what works and what doesn't. So
Yeah,
you're kind of
that's
an
what
experimenter.
draws me to this area, because it's just very applied, and I enjoy that a lot.
All right, so this brings us to CodeX, and I'd really like to understand, how did it start? Like how did this idea come together and become CodeX?
So my former boss, when I was a teaching fellow at the law school, was Peggy Radin, and she was one of the first people to think about property rights on the internet, and wrote a casebook on e-commerce law. And she knew Mike Genesaret in computer science and taught about the law in his class on computers and law. And we somehow, some others who kind of came from Stanford students and also people externally, we decided to do a workshop one weekend at Stanford. And we said, well, there's a real opportunity in starting to do more work on bringing technology to the legal system. And that was about a little bit over 10 years ago now. And we said, why don't we start a center that will help us kind of organize our efforts around this? And so we started brainstorming ideas for names, and we even considered the name Lex Machina. That's or Lex Machina. That's one of the contributors, one of the co-founders, I guess, proposed that, but then later used it for a spin-off that we used, but that we did. But yeah, I think at the time it was sort of the blossoming of interdisciplinary research at Stanford. Different centers were started. That all had an X in them. There's a BioX Center and a MediaX Center to indicate that they're the bringing together of different disciplines and the intersection of different disciplines. And so it made sense for us. I mean, CodeX from that point of view, as the intersection of computer code and legal code, but also the famous Codex Hammurabi. And we truly think, the Codex Hammurabi was a tremendous milestone in human culture and in legal history, and we think that sort of this digitization and of the legal system is as important a milestone in human history as the Codex Hammurabi, and so that's why we all kind of came together around the name Codex for the center.
Okay, that makes sense now. So X kind of is a crossroads for different disciplines, and then as a nod to the Hammurabi code.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So Codex is like a formalization and center around the concept of legal informatics that we just talked about, right?
Exactly. And again, our focus is on this area of computational law, although not all the projects that are being carried out under the Codex umbrella are squarely in that computational law area, but that's really where we see the revolution coming, and so that's really our focus area.
And if I remember correctly, I might not, but the computational law, is that the one that you had broken down into rules-based versus?
Yeah, well, it has those two aspects to it. So one is the rule-based approach, the TurboTax approach, if you wish, and the other one's the predictive analytics in legal settings.
And that overlaps perfectly with how things are, and I'm sure this is where it came from. It's just coming together for me right now. Understanding that it overlays with AI in that artificial intelligence has two different branches of it. One is your rules-based approach, and then you also have machine learning predictive analysis approach.
Exactly, that's exactly right. The different techniques, approaches to solving problems, and not every different legal problems require different approaches. And it's not to say that they're mutually exclusive. They can be brought together in different projects and leverage each other's strength. But there's this is sort of one of the sort of big kind of dividing lines in general in AI and also in sort of AI in the law. It's sort of the rule-based logic programming, logic modeling approach, and the statistical approach, machine learning, where you just go through big sets of data and try to understand the patterns.
Mm-hmm. So what are some examples of how CodeX has pushed that mission forward, like some things that it's done in terms of computational law?
Well, we have let me see. Our focus is very, we research and we publish, but our focus is really on building projects, and we've built computational law systems. One system we created is what we called SIPX, the Stanford Intellectual Property Exchange. That's a system that helps universities manage copyrights. It's one of the things that universities do is they license a lot of materials from publishers, but then the teachers don't necessarily know what's licensed and what's not, and then they have to get permission again or pay for permission again to use certain materials in course materials. And so that system helped in kind of understanding the rights and applying them to the specific students in the specific courses. And sort of a system that helps you comply with copyright law, and so you don't have to pirate content, basically. So that's a computational law system. We've also worked on projects like our smart prosecution project, where we worked with San Francisco DA, going through arrest reports that 14 police officers made, 14 police officers that were suspended or fired from the police force for racist text messaging. And so we helped sort of go through these arrest reports to try to understand which arrests may have been based on bias and which ones on racial bias and which ones weren't. I think this is still an ongoing project, but the long-term goal for the DA is to create a tool that helps them, basically, vet, police reports to make sure that the pipeline of cases they're getting from the police department is not spoiled with, reports that, with arrests that were made based on racial bias. But this is an ongoing project, but we had to go through unstructured data, the texts of those reports, and turn them into structured data and filter out specific data points in those. And then, we're going to start doing some machine learning on top of that to try to see the patterns that, that we can take from those reports. And so that's, again, it's an ongoing project, but that's another example. But what we do generally is just to, we try to also kind of host academic events and conferences on those topics. We've been hosting several events on the concept of computable contracts. So these kind of self-executing contracts. That's a big research interest of ours, and we try to bring the community together to advance the discourse in that area. And sort of we also put on these kind of weekly group meetings where we bring in interesting people, work on interesting projects, many of them in the computational law space. And then our big flagship program is the Stanford Future Law Conference, which just happened this past April. And their computational law is sort of a big part of it. So those are sort of the different kinds of things we do to advance the computational law mission. We're in talks to actually create a journal on computational law, but that's sort of one of our next projects.
Wow, it sounds like it keeps you very busy.
It does, but it's all good fun.
So there's these specific projects like CIPIX, which that got spun out to a private company, right, in 2012?
That became a company, and that was acquired by a publishing platform called ProQuest, yes.
And then
another example is Lex Machina, which is also was a research project first at Stanford. It also went the spin-off route, and that's a project that's more on the predictive analytics side. Although they don't want to be known as being on the predictive analytics side, because they say they are in a data-driven decision-making space. Because I think the term legal prediction, I think, makes a lot of practicing lawyers somewhat uncomfortable, because I think it suggests that sort of their core function of exercising legal judgment based on their experience is somehow substitutable or replaceable by machines or by the famous robo-lawyer. And so I guess a lot of those companies that even until recently sort of claimed that they are in the legal prediction space, they've somewhat dialed back their rhetoric, and they, they're no longer saying that they're in legal prediction.
And what do you think about that? I mean, you've been working in this space for, I mean, with Codex for at least 10 years, but
Yeah.
beyond that, you've been working in this space. And, within the past, I would say, couple of years, maybe year and a half, it's gotten almost white hot in terms of
Mhm.
this interest in AI and the application to law and all that. What do you think about the hype? Is it overhyped?
That's a great question too. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hype in it. I think not just in legal, in elsewhere also. And I think it's what they call the big bang of AI, which started about 2012, and that has to do with different technologies coming together. The ability to process like big data, machine learning. The lower cost of processing and storage of data, even faster processors. This all has sort of reached a level where very kind of fairly complex tasks of AI are possible, and now things that we've talked about for a long time. Think of the self-driving car, for example.
Hmm.
They're becoming a reality. I mean, they're already driving around here in the Bay Area and in other places. And so I think that sort of has created a heightened level of awareness of the possibilities of AI. People have Siri in their phones, they have Alexa and that sort of thing. And so this idea of the robo lawyer, that people kind of brushed off until a few years ago, all of a sudden becomes a more kind of realistic scenario. But that said, I think we're not at the point in not in a long time where we have a robo lawyer who can argue a case in court, or who can where we can fully automate complex legal tasks. I think for the most part those systems are truly sort of lawyer enhancing systems, sort of the data driven decision to support systems that will allow lawyers to, as they say, operate at the top of their license. And so I don't think that AI will replace lawyers in anywhere in the near future. And I do think though that there will be a lot of. I mean, I do think though there's a lot of pressure on the legal profession, just because there's new competitors now, and we have this unbundling of legal tasks, and the clients that are more aggressively shopping for legal solutions, and law firms in the traditional law firm is now facing competition from alternative legal service providers, Axioms of the world, and from LP legal process outsourcers to legal technology companies that take care of one more discrete aspect of the kind of work that the clients need to do in their legal operation. And that work was that those kinds of companies, they leverage technology quite a bit, and law firms in their old model are sort of struggling to compete, and they're losing business to those providers. And so yeah, this is a kind of very long-winded way of answering your question, but I think there is a lot of hype on AI. At the same time, I think there will be more and more technology, and so I think there has been this talk has been the disruption talk about that the legal profession being disrupted, that has been out there for at least the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you then talk to a lot of law firms, it seems like there was maybe only change around the edges, and so there's not really at least for big law any kind of major disruption yet. But I think the law firms still have to be prepared uh, for very significant changes, and many of those will be technology driven.
No, that's a great answer, because it ties right into the part I wanted to talk to you about the future of the practice of law. And in terms of the rate of change, are you surprised by the current rate of change in terms of the development of
I mean, it's
technology and how it's being applied?
uh, exploded into the awareness of lawyers. I think most law firms are now trying to think about how do they counteract this kind of losing business to these alternative legal service providers, technology companies, to their clients. Also the client. I mean, the biggest competitors are their clients. Clients are insourcing more and more legal work, and so there's a great level of awareness. And a lot of law firms are experimenting with different things. Some started their own kind of legal placement service, for having their alumni work at companies on secondment, like Fenwick did with the Flex program, or Safeguard Shaw is doing its, trying to break legal projects and approach legal projects like in this Lean Six Sigma way. And other firms, like very large firms, just recently learned, like Baker McKenzie, they're hiring more and more legal project managers just to be more kind of to have more sort of legal business solutions that are really integrated in the client's in a client's business. One of the things that I think a recent study showed in England, I think it was Cambridge and LexisNexis that did that study, was that I think most clients, or 60% of clients, say that they think that their lawyers don't have a good understanding of the client's business, and that's a huge problem, right? And so I think lawyers will have to be more and more really aware of what the challenges are for the client, and rather than providing legal opinions, they have to provide legal solutions. And so the next and then the next thing is they also have to not think in sort of legal services, and certainly not the hourly services, but they have to start thinking more in terms of like building legal products. How can they that kind of work that is commoditizing, that's the repeat kind of systematic low level work, how can they create systems that will be able to handle that work, and that they don't have to provide in the old kind of billable hour way. And so so I think that's
Yeah, I mean, that definitely anticipates something I wanted to ask you about, which was whether or not you thought the billable hours is sustainable
not really. I mean,
business model.
I do think that that computers will be able, or are already able, to do better on legal research, and and will very soon be able to draft draft memos and that sort of thing. But if you're a courtroom lawyer, sort of this ability to advocate and to persuade a jury of your point of view, I think this is still very kind of it will require human intelligence. And the lawyers who are specialized in that, the litigators, I think they will in the future be able to still bill by the hour and charge a huge premium for that kind of skill. But I think on the more transactional legal practice, I think lawyers will not be able to, in the long run, to for the more mundane kind of transactional practice, they will not be able to charge that sort of on the billable hour. And so I think there will be much more kind of project based and flat fee based uh, billing.
Right.
But if it's a very complex M&A transaction, that sort of thing, I can see that law firms might be able to do more kind of hourly billing, or do the hourly billing for a longer period of time. But I think even there, I think the clients will ask, and the law firms will be providing their services on a kind of a flat fee basis. And then
So,
efficiency and leveraging technology becomes much more important, of course.
mhm. What do you like? What is the most important thing that lawyers can do to succeed in this new environment?
I think
Do you
have an
think?
open mind and talk to the legal technologists and legal engineers. I don't think they have to learn how to program themselves, but they have to have at those conversations, even with the clients, maybe bring the legal technologist or the project manager along and come up with legal business solutions for the client. I think that's I think also the ABA in its report on the future of the legal services market has sort of made that point. It's one of the recommendations that lawyers should really talk to folks in other disciplines and try to get some inspiration from there.
All right. So lawyers to succeed should keep an open mind, and also try it out. Right. Get in front of it.
Think
Experiment.
about all the different ways that a legal service can be sort of, I think, broken down into its component, all its components, and then think about maybe for a specific part of um, this project, we can leverage technology, and other parts need to be managed by human lawyers, and then have a very kind of a system that will also understand when a client, how far a client can be sort of brought along in an automated way, and then when a certain issue sort of requires that it be escalated to a human lawyer. I think lawyers have to kind of open their minds to creating systems like that, and they will have to work with legal engineers to come up with those solutions.
Well, those are great words of advice, and I hope that lawyers follow those words and implement that in their own practice, because I agree with you that that's the only way to stay ahead and be relevant in this new reality.
And I agree. I mean, and if they are, I mean, the nice thing about if you have a solution, then once you have it in place, then you don't. Then it's much more scalable than the billable hour, right? You can provide that service to many of your clients and make money in your sleep.
That's right. That's the beauty of it, and also the ability to work from anywhere if it's a web-based or online service that's provided. One question I have from a listener is, what parallel developments do you see concerning the future of law that has occurred in other languages and other countries? So I guess just generally, what's a standout innovation that you've seen outside of North America that has been geared towards this legal tech focus?
Well, I think legal innovation, legal technology is really coming of age in many different places. There are lots of events for sure in different places, but lots of startup activities also. UK, Germany has a very lively community. France. I was just yesterday spoke with folks who are working on an interesting project on building platforms, but also using machine learning for labor disputes in Mexico, which is a big thing. So it's all over the world. We actually weekly CodeX meetings, we always set up a video conference, and then we have people presenting. We have people from India, from Chile, from all around the world with really interesting ideas for how to solve legal problems with technology. And so this is a global movement, I think, and it's coming to many different countries, and it's, I think, it's a really exciting time in the space. Sometimes I think it's almost, if certain countries have sort of less installed kind of legacy systems in the courts or in legislative bodies, and there might be even some kind of developing countries might be in certain areas more advanced than the US.
Yeah, that's something that struck me too, is that the change in this area has been global. There's no simple, this is happening in the US or in parts of Europe, but throughout the world, everyone's working on this problem right now.
Exactly.
So let's see if there's any more questions that we have here. So some ways for people to get engaged or stay engaged with your work at CodeX. There's the annual conference that is really the gold standard, I think, in terms of
Thank you.
Developments in the legal tech space that people can attend. There's also the journal, which would be coming out in the future.
Yes. Stay tuned for that. There's also our weekly. So if you go to our website at codex.stanford.edu, we have actually two mailing lists. So one is the one for the weekly group meetings, and we kind of slowed down the pace a little bit because the quarter is almost over and we're going into the summer. So we'll have, I think, one in June, one in July, and one in August. But then in the fall we'll pick it up. We'll pick up our weekly schedule again. And so you can sign up for those group meetings, and then you can participate remotely. You can also present if you have a new project or idea, to present, and you want to use the group as a sounding board. That's really what that meeting is. That weekly meeting is meant to do. Really bring the community together, and it's a very kind of collegial environment, and no judgment, and it's a lot of bright minds. And that group meeting has been growing quite a bit, and so we'd love for you all to participate. So just put your email on the list if you can, and then we also have the CodeX announce list. That's for sort of the larger events we have. We typically have a monthly speaker series where that's usually more academic, but sometimes we bring in general counsels who have done interesting things at their companies. And so that list is for the larger events and for our future law conference. So it's those three formats, I should say, we have where we'd love for people to get involved. And typically we have not a web, like we used to use Blue Jeans, but I think we're going to use a new system now to broadcast those meetings out into the web.
And so what is that URL again where they could sign up?
It's at CodeX, so codex.stanford.edu.
Perfect. All right, well, I have one last question for you, Roland, and it's kind of off the beaten path of what I've asked you before. But I'm curious to know, what's a place on your bucket list that you've never visited before, but you would definitely like to, and why?
There's so many places I still want to see. And my wife and I, we have 3 little kids, so our traveling, we've sort of cut back on our traveling in recent years. We've been to Kauai recently, which I thought is a fantastic place. But what's sort of next on my list is I'd love to go to Tahiti. It's just because I think it's really must be a very beautiful place. And then I also want to go and see India. So I think those two places are sort of next on our list.
Wow, that sounds fantastic, and I hope that happens soon.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to go
Well,
to
thank you.
Vancouver and visit you.
Yeah, and if you are ever in town, just look, text me or give me a tweet or something. I'll show you around.
I would I would love to. Oh, Nassim says, why India? It's very hot. Yeah, I hear that. Why India? I think for, I don't know, it's just, it seems like a really interesting culture and with a lot of diversity. And I love Indian food. And I try to do some yoga every now and then. So I think it's just a fascinating place, but I've never been. Okay, I hear I should visit in December. And I've started to talk to some folks in India about collaborating on a legal tech event in India. So maybe I'll combine it with that. So we'll see.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, there's a huge, there's a huge interest and availability of development and engineers
Yeah.
in India. So that would be a
And
great.
they have very tremendous talent there, and also court system, I think, which has a huge backlog, and it seems like there's also a lot of opportunity to bring technology to the Indian legal system.
Well, thank you, Roland. I loved getting to know you better and learned more about Codex and where the law is heading. And I wish you the best for the future.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for the
Well,
opportunity.
oh, you're very welcome. And I want to thank you again for sharing your time and thoughts. And I also want to thank all of you attendees for coming and listening to our teleconference today, which was called The Origin Story of Codex Stanford and the Future of the Practice of Law with Roland Vogl. Again, this is Tom Martin, and I want to again thank GLSA for sponsoring. Remember, Group Legal Services Association is just a good way for solos and small firms to increase their business. And check us out at glsaonline.org. See you next month. Thanks, Roland.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.